You think it's love, but something still feels hollow. You try to smile through it. You say it must be real. It has to be because how could something that felt this intense be false? But in the quiet, you can feel it. The ache, the restlessness, the sense that you're reaching for something that won't stay. It looks like love. It speaks like love. It even hurts like love. But it isn't love. It's a mirror, a reflection of your hunger, not your healing. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And one of the most seductive distractions is the illusion of being chosen. We mistake relief for romance. We confuse the rush of desire with the stillness of love." And then we build castles on quicksand. There's a kind of attention that feels like oxygen. It arrives when you're starving for validation. They see you, they praise you. And in that moment, your pain disappears. You don't feel empty, you feel seen, you feel wanted, but that feeling is fragile. It depends on them showing up. It depends on them continuing to play the part. And when they don't, when they disappear, go cold, change tones, you crumble. Because what you were calling love was actually escape. An escape from the ache of your own silence. From the years of feeling not enough, from the part of you that still whispers, "If someone chooses me, then I matter." But Jung would tell us that whisper is the shadow. And the shadow doesn't want you to grow, it wants you to survive. Even if surviving means staying in patterns that make you suffer, you weren't drawn to them by accident. You were drawn by recognition, hot soul recognition, wound recognition. They reminded you unconsciously of something you've been trying to resolve, a parent who wasn't present, a love that once felt conditional, a silence that taught you your needs were too loud. So when someone gives you just enough to feel special, but not enough to feel secure, you cling. You don't just want them, you want the chance to rewrite the story. If I can just get them to love me fully, if I can just prove I'm worthy enough, if I can finally be enough to stay, then maybe the pain I've been carrying will finally be erased. But that's not love. That's reenactment. And reenactment will always feel like deja vu. It feels real because it mirrors your earliest blueprint for connection. But real love isn't built on adrenaline. It's built on presence. And presence doesn't make you anxious. It makes you feel safe. They knew what to say. They looked at you like you were the center of gravity. They made you feel alive, but they never really stayed. And still you clung to every moment, every glance, every message, every promise, hoping that this time would be different. That if you could just be enough, they'd stop pulling away. You told yourself it was love. But the truth was, you were addicted to how they made you feel about yourself. They gave you a high that made your pain vanish, even if just for a moment. That's not love. That's a pleasure trap. Because true love doesn't only see you in your light, it stays with you through the dark. But when someone only reflects your worth while they're present, you start needing them to feel whole. And when they leave, it's not just heartbreak. It's identity collapse. You start thinking, if they don't want me, was I ever enough to begin with? But that question isn't yours to answer. It belongs to the version of you that was never taught that worth isn't something to earn. It's something you already carry. You just forgot. Carl Jung believed that we project our unlived parts onto others. We fall for people who awaken something we've been disconnected from. Not because they complete us, but because they reflect back the parts of us we've disowned. Sometimes what you crave in someone else is the version of yourself you haven't yet become. You don't miss them. You miss who you were when you felt wanted. You miss the version of you that didn't doubt their worth, that walked taller, that smiled more. But if that version of you only exists when someone else sees it, then it was never love that made you feel full. It was approval. And approval can never be the foundation of love, because the moment it's taken away, everything built on top of it begins to fall. There is a moment in every pleasure trap when the truth becomes unbearable. It's when the highs no longer distract you from the hollowness, when the craving starts to feel like grief, when your body knows it's not safe but your mind can't let go. That's when you realize you were never chasing them. You were chasing relief from the emptiness, from the fear, from yourself. And the one thing you were running from, the silence, was never trying to punish you. It was trying to meet you on a cue to show you what hurts, to help you remember who you were before you tied your worth to someone else's attention. If this sounds like your story, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're human. And you're waking up. Waking up from the idea that love must come through suffering, that you need to be chosen to be whole, that someone else's validation is the only path to peace. The ache you feel is not a sign you've lost something real. It's a sign that something inside you is ready to stop performing for love and start remembering that you were worthy all along. You don't have to prove anything anymore. You don't have to chase what doesn't stay. You don't have to call pain a soulmate. You are allowed to want peace. You are allowed to let go. You are allowed to rest. If this message stirred something in you, if you've ever mistaken relief for romance, if you've ever felt like you were chasing connection but losing yourself in the process, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. Have you ever realized it wasn't love? It was just a way to escape the silence. Your story might be the mirror someone else needs today. Thank you for being here, but don't look away just yet. Because if you stay with this reflection a little longer, you might finally see the invisible hand that's been pulling you back and begin to understand why the love you want will never come from the place you've been searching. Not because it was supposed to, but because your nervous system learned to recognize pain as home. The people who ignored you, who made you feel invisible, they shaped your blueprint. The ones who offered you love in exchange for silence, for performance, for shrinking yourself. They taught you what to expect, and now when someone gives you chaos, you lean in. When they pull away, you reach harder. When they disappear, your mind writes a story that blames you. This isn't because you don't know better. It's because part of you still believes that if you finally get it right this time, the past might not hurt so much. But that belief is the reason you're stuck. It keeps you chasing people who recreate the original wound because your psyche doesn't want freedom. It wants resolution. And it will keep inviting the same lesson until you see the pattern, feel the pain, and say, no more. The root of craving isn't love, it's memory. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious doesn't forget. Even when your mind has buried the story, your body remembers every moment it felt unsafe to be yourself. Every time you expressed a need and were punished for it. Every time you showed joy and were mocked. Every time you were vulnerable and left alone with it. These aren't just memories. They become internal laws, rules you follow without even knowing. Don't ask for too much. Don't trust love. It disappears. If someone hurts you, it's because you deserved it. And worst of all, if they leave, it means something's wrong with you. This is the foundation of the pleasure trap. Because when someone finally comes along and gives you attention, even if it's inconsistent, even if it's laced with anxiety, your nervous system lights up. Not because you feel safe, but because the pattern is familiar. It mimics the earliest bond, the one you couldn't question as a child, the one you had to adapt to, the one that made love conditional. And now that conditional love is what you keep searching for. You don't chase people. You chase the emotional blueprint that shaped you. You meet someone stable, kind, available, and yet you feel nothing. No butterflies, no urgency, no obsession. So you tell yourself, they're not my type. There's no spark. They're too nice. But what you're really saying is they don't activate my trauma. When you've lived your whole life in emotional survival, safety feels suspicious. Peace feels boring. Consistency feels foreign. And being loved without having to earn it feels undeserved. So you push it away. You ghost the healthy ones. You chase the ones who trigger you. Not because you're toxic, but because your body still thinks that tension equals importance. That anxiety means you care. That love must be dramatic to be real. But that's not love. That's survival. That's what it looks like when the shadow chooses your relationships. Carl Jung taught that the shadow isn't evil. It's just unconscious. It holds the parts of you that were shamed, ignored, or rejected. And it tries to protect you by keeping you close to what it understands, even if what it understands is pain. So, the shadow creates defense mechanisms. It convinces you to stay with what's familiar. It sabotages peace. It questions real intimacy. It whispers, "This is too easy. Something must be wrong." And when things get too still, too soft, too kind, you panic. You start fights. You distance yourself. You convince yourself that this kind of love is fake. But what's really happening is that your shadow is terrified of being seen without your armor. Because for so long, love was about performance. It was about being good enough to keep someone from leaving. And now that someone doesn't require the performance, you don't know who to be. But the discomfort you feel isn't a red flag. It's a signal that your nervous system is adjusting to a new reality. One where love doesn't cost you your peace. You don't need to prove you're worthy of love. You don't need to shrink to be chosen. You don't need to trade your silence for temporary affection. But to truly live that truth, you must first face the shadow. Not fight it, not shame it, but listen to it. Ask the part of you that always chases, "What are you afraid will happen if we stop?" Ask the part that pulls away from kindness. "What does safety feel like to you?" Ask the part that only feels alive in chaos. When did calm start feeling like danger? This is the inner work Jung called individuation, becoming whole by integrating what we've hidden. And it starts with a simple but terrifying act. Honesty. Honesty about what you feel. Honesty about why you stay. Honesty about what you're really searching for. Not someone who completes you, but someone who doesn't require you to abandon yourself. There's something inside you that knows the truth. Even if you've never had a healthy relationship, even if you've never seen real love up close, there's a deeper voice beneath the craving. It doesn't scream. It doesn't chase. It waits. It's the part of you that remembers what peace feels like. The part of you that's tired of running. The part that no longer wants to mistake obsession for intimacy. And that voice is growing louder. You hear it in the moments you pause before reaching out, in the seconds you stop yourself from justifying their behavior, in the deep breath you take when you feel the old ache. But don't act on it. That's not weakness. That's awareness. That's healing. You're beginning to break the cycle, not by force, but by understanding. By realizing that you no longer need to repeat the past in order to feel safe. You can choose differently, not from fear, but from clarity. The pleasure trap was never about them. It was about your story, the one you've been living in without even knowing. The one where love equals pain and connection must be earned. But what if that story is ready to end? What if all the chaos, the craving, the collapse was just your soul asking for something truer? Not louder, not brighter, just real. There's a different kind of love waiting. Frayed. One that doesn't trigger your nervous system. One that doesn't leave you starving. One that begins not when someone chooses you, but when you stop betraying yourself to feel chosen. And the first step toward that kind of love is learning how to meet the part of you that's still chasing the one who never stayed. The truth is, what we often call love has been something else all along. It has been projection, has been craving. It has been the nervous system chasing relief and calling it destiny. But now you're beginning to see. You're beginning to notice that the one who always left you empty was not the problem. The problem was the pattern, the blueprint that said, if it hurts, it must be love. And here's where Jung's wisdom becomes life-changing, because he never told us to reject our shadow. He told us to listen, to see what it wants, to hear what it fears, because the shadow isn't an enemy. It's a wounded protector. And until you face it, it will keep building traps that look like romance. There's a part of you that sabotages your peace. It makes you text back when you swore you'd walk away. It convinces you to settle when you know you deserve more. It makes silence unbearable. So you fill it with people who only mirror your ache. This part of you is not cruel. It's scared. It still believes you cannot survive rejection. It still believes abandonment means death, and so it drags you back over and over to the arms of those who will never stay. Jung's answer was not to repress this saboteur. It was to dialogue with it, to sit with it in imagination as if it were a person and ask, "What are you protecting me from? What do you fear will happen if I let go?" When you listen, you realize the saboteur has always been trying to save you. It just doesn't know you've grown. It still thinks you're the child who needed to perform to be loved. It still thinks that choosing peace means risking rejection. It still thinks chaos is safer than being left alone. But once you see it, you can thank it. You can tell it, "I hear you. I know you're scared, but I'm not that child anymore." And slowly it begins to release its grip. Every painful pattern carries energy. The craving, the jealousy, the panic when someone pulls away, these are not weaknesses. They are signals that there's life trapped inside your wounds. Anger, for example, can become courage when understood. Fear can become intuition. Insecurity can turn into humility. Even jealousy, when faced honestly, can become the reminder that you too deserve to be fully chosen. Jung said, "Where there is fear, there is power," which means the places you've been running from are not just prisons, they are doors. Behind them is the energy you've been missing. Behind them is the strength you've been searching for in others. The pleasure trap collapses not when you reject your cravings, but when you reclaim them. When you ask, "What is this emotion trying to teach me? What part of me needs attention right now? What gift is buried inside this pain?" Because once you stop fighting your emotions, you begin to use them. And suddenly what once felt like sabotage becomes fuel. Real love is not built on obsession. It's built on honesty. It doesn't demand that you shrink. It doesn't punish you for having needs. It doesn't disappear when things get difficult. Real love is quiet enough for your soul to breathe. It's steady enough for your nervous system to relax. It's deep enough to hold the shadow without fear. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop chasing the wrong kind of love, you create space for the right kind to appear. Not because someone suddenly saves you, but because you finally meet yourself. And when you meet yourself, you no longer need to play roles. You no longer need to perform. You no longer need to mistake intensity for intimacy. You can let someone love you as you are, not as the mask you've been wearing. That is the freedom Jung pointed toward. The freedom of individuation. The freedom of becoming whole. Not perfect, not flawless, but complete. The truth is this. You were never unworthy. You were never too much. You were never broken. You were simply carrying the beliefs of the child who thought love must hurt. And now you're putting those beliefs down. This doesn't mean the shadow disappears. It means it becomes part of you, no longer pulling the strings in secret. It means that when you feel the craving to run back, you can pause. You can ask, is this love or is this fear dressed as love? And for the first time, you can choose differently. That choice is everything. It's the difference between repeating the past and writing a new story. So here you are on the edge of that choice. Do you keep chasing what soothes but never heals? Or do you sit with the silence long enough to discover that you don't need saving anymore? Because the moment you stop calling chaos love, something beautiful happens. The hunger softens, the shadow quiets, and the soul finally has space to speak. It tells you you are always enough, and the love you've been searching for begins here.